Hello and welcome to Love Surf Connect. My name is Alfredina and today we're doing another story time video. If you missed the first one, um, we spoke about Cain and Abel, and we got their story from Genesis, but inspired on Hebrews 11. We're going one by one through all of the people that were mentioned in this chapter of Hebrews that's telling us all about faith and how people experience their faith. So maybe we take something out of it. And today's character is Enoch. Not a lot is said about Enoch, but I will tell you all the things I learned now that I was reading about him. And I really love his story. His is a story that I've known since I was a little girl. And it goes like this. There once was a man named Enoch. He's actually a direct descendant from Adam. And we learn about him when we're going through the lineage. Adam had this one had that one, and it tells you who had who. And eventually it gets to Enoch. And it says, and Enoch was born when he was 65 years old. He had a son named Methuselah. I don't know if you've heard that name before, but he is known as the man who lived the longest. He was recorded to have lived 969 years. So today's story is about his father, the man who became a father at 65. And that is very significant because the Bible tells us that when he turned 65, he started walking closer to God than he ever had. And for the next 300 years after he became a father for the first time, he had other sons and daughters, so he continued to live within his family. He walked with God. He walked closely with God. And then one day he disappeared because God took him. And that's basically what wraps up his story. So as a young girl, as a child, I would hear that story and be amazed at the fact that you could walk so closely with God that he would want to take you. And that's it, skip death, skip everything, and just be taken up to heaven. That's how I saw it then. And what informed that a bit was, the stories when somebody's teaching you them. One pastor I remember saying this story in this way. He said that Enoch and God were friends, and every day they would spend time together and go on walks. And one day in their daily walk with God, they got so close to God's house that God was just like, hey, why don't you come home with me instead of walking you back? Which sounded so beautiful to me. But it kind of left it like that, like up in the air, like, oh, you're walking with God. You had a baby and then you just left to walk with God. And then he just took you. And yeah, so that's the story of Enoch. Except that was the story of Enoch as I understood it as a 7, 8, 9-year-old. But there was a very important line in the text where it said Enoch was 65 when he became a father, and after he became a father, he started walking closer to God. And I got to experience that now that I'm a mother. When we become parents, you can understand better the way God loves you. But another thing is that it clarifies, or it can. Everybody's parenting journey is different, right? And we all come from different backgrounds. But for me and some parents that I know as well, once you have kids, your priorities get clearer. Suddenly, maybe if you had strayed away from the faith, once you have this little human in your midst, you're more inclined to want to look for God, or you're suddenly, we immediately become less selfish because it's not just about us, it's also about another life. And I don't mean selfish and like, if you don't have kids, you're selfish. We can be selfish with or without kids, and we could be selfless with or without kids. But our natural God-given tendency to want to stay alive means that we are looking out for ourselves. And the decisions that we make, the weight of that is just we will be the ones to pay the consequences for them. But when you bring children into this world, suddenly that weight can become a lot. And I, for one, have experienced a closer walk with God. So because because you quickly can figure out how many things can kill your child. I used to say, when I was pregnant, because, you're growing a body, you understand that there's a human in there, especially in the third trimester, and they're like stretching, and um, you can definitely feel a completely different other person inside of your body. You know that they're there, but you don't know anything. Like if you get sick, you're like, am I going to get a fever? Is this going to kill my child? If they're not moving all day when they're normally active, you're like, are they okay? Are they fine? And you can't really peek. And I used to be like, I wish I was a marsupial. I could just like peek in and see that they were okay. And then, just keep cooking. But I wanted to be able to see them. My favorite days were when I was able to hear their heartbeats and see them moving around with ultrasounds. Um, but then quick, and all I wanted was for them to come out so I could hold them. But then as soon as they would come out, then suddenly this tiny fragile thing was there. And all I wanted to do was put them back in my body where I knew that they were safe, where they weren't going to be too cold or too hot or hungry or have tummy aches or any of those things. Like they were just going to be okay and protected. And quickly, that anxiety, and I've spoken about that in another video, but drove me to get closer to God because I wanted to do the best job that I could, but I was riddled with anxiety. And the only one that could actually protect me, my son, my family, um, and then protect my other son when he came into this world, my children, my home, was God. So in that way, my anxiety was a blessing in disguise because it got me to be closer to God. My prayer life changed completely. Um, and I started walking with him in a way that I hadn't before, meaning I started depending on him in a way that I didn't before. And as my children grew from babies into toddlers and now young boys, there is a different kind of intimacy that I feel I can have with the father because of my relationship with my kids. First, I know how much I'm loved. Well, not exactly, but I know that I'm loved very much because if I love these children so much and my love for them consumes me, how much more does the Father love me? And that amount of love is truly, um, it's truly transformative. So I wonder what happened with Enoch. What were the things that transformed him after he became a father? When he had that little baby and he saw into his eyes and he heard him cry and maybe, had him hold his finger. What happened in his heart that drew him closer to God to the point where he walked so closely with him, not for a little bit of time. He walked closely with God from the age of 65 for 300 years. He was just in close communion with God. And that's absolutely beautiful that the reward that he got was to not see death, but just go and live eternity with God. I mean, that's one of those things where if I could choose a way to go, that's what I want to do. But going back to the way I interpreted that as a child, I thought, well, that's kind of irresponsible. Like he had a baby and then he just went off and disappeared with God. But once again, there's tiny little details to this person. And one of those details was that he had more sons and daughters. He had more sons and daughters, which means that he didn't just wake up and go hide him. He didn't hide at the top of a mountain seeking for the Lord, and he didn't do a vow where he just disappeared into mountains and or a cave, and he did not become a recluse. He was still in his family. He was still making babies. He was still raising a family. He was still living, right? And that is beautiful because sometimes we can feel that if being close to God means being away from people, or that being in the day to day of having family, of working, of living this earthly life is it's the biggest hindrance that we have to walking close with God. And Enoch teaches us the exact opposite. He started walking with God the closest after he became a father. But there's something else that we know from him. And for that, we would go to the book of Jude. In Jude, there's this 2 or 3 verses. I think they're 14, 15. Let's see. Wrote it down. Jude 14 and 15. And it talks about how Enoch was prophesying about these people. And I was like, what people is he talking about? Is Jude talking about? So I read the entire book, which is a chapter, but we're going to call it a book because that's great. Sounds better. So I read the whole book, and he was talking about people who are no longer, they don't believe in God, right? And they are mockers, and they make fun of God, and they are evil, and they are wicked. And they say that because of grace and the salvation that Christ gave us, they say because of that, we're free to do whatever we want. We can live sexually immoral lives. We can basically do whatever we want. We can sin as much as we want, and that's okay because of grace. And they push that, and they make fun of, they have no respect for heavenly beings, for nobody, basically. And so this chapter is Jude warning us against the teachings of these people, because they're here and they are amongst us sometimes, and they are going to lead you astray. And he stops to say that Enoch prophesied of this people even long ago. So this is after Jesus was resurrected and went to heaven that Jude is talking. But he's saying that people like this have always been, even back when Enoch was alive. And he prophesied about them to warn us so that we would stay faithful. That tells me another thing. Not only did Enoch walk close with God, got closer to him when he started building a family, he was also a family man because he continued to have children, but he was also preaching and teaching. He was prophesying. He was warning people of danger so that they could walk with God just like he was. And that tells me the next thing, which is when you're walking close with God, you're not staying away from people, but you instead are pouring into them. Being close with God gives you a heart, the heart of Christ. And Christ's heart is for you, and it's for me, and it's for people. So that is a great thing to learn from him, that not only are you going to be in the presence of God, and that is well received. And what Hebrews says about Enoch is that he pleased God because of his faith. So you will be pleasing God, but you can have that relationship with God, and that will enhance your other relationships. And just your little core family won't be enough. You will take the time to work in your spiritual gifts to build his body, even outside of your own family. So for a character that doesn't have a whole book in the Bible, for a character that we don't hear a lot of, we have such beautiful teachings. And I want to summarize it with this. When I first got married, my husband and I have always been very mission minded. And when we were single adults living together, meaning married with no children, it was so easy to host all the movie nights, all the Bible studies, to have our house open completely. If people wanted to stay at whatever hours, that was okay. Like, it was so easy to say yes to every opportunity and all these things. And that felt like, it felt like the right way to do ministry. But at the same time, we were trying to conceive. And every month that the pregnancy test would be negative, I would think, well, maybe God doesn't want us to have kids because, well, Paul says that it's better if we don't, or whatever. And all these doubts get into your head. But nothing struck me more than when I did become pregnant and have my children. And one and then two, close in age. I had two babies that needed a lot, right? They needed to eat around the clock. They needed structure, routines. And I was more than happy to give them that. But that meant that I wasn't as hands-on as I had grown accustomed to being with the church or with hosting or doing Bible studies or just accompanying my husband. Like that was one of my favorite things, to go to people's houses and teach with him and pray with them and do all of these things. Like I loved doing that. But I had babies that couldn't just stay quietly in a corner while the Bible was reread, and who had bedtimes and all these things, and nap times and eating schedules and all these things. So I was beginning to feel that maybe you had to choose whether you were going to walk close with God and be in ministry and love others well, or have a family. And I'm not going to lie to you. I felt sometimes guilty for having chosen a family, and how much that fed me and how happy I was to be blessed with these boys, because I felt like I do have the heart of Christ for people, and I do hurt for the lost, and I did want to open my home. But life comes in seasons, and the selflessness that I've learned in being a mother, the sacrifice, the discipline that I'm building in being a mother, has only helped me love others better. It has taught me compassion and empathy like nothing else has so far in my life. Um, and this story is so beautiful because this has been said about no one else but him, that he walked so closely to God that God just took him home without seeing death. And this wasn't a man that was off by himself. This was a man in the context of a family with children and a ministry where he took the time to pour into others to help them get close to God. So if he can do it, and rather, if God could do it through him, he can do it through you. And remember, whatever stage of life you're in, whether that is single, whether that is married with no children, married with children, with grandkids, with an empty nest, it doesn't matter where you are right now in your season of life, whatever process you're going through, God can use that to get you closer to him, to be in close relationship with him. He can transform your heart to be more like him. And he can use all that process to bring his light into dark places from right where you are. So today, let's remember who Enoch was, or Enoch is, up in God and with God, and the amazing example he gave us, that life is not a hindrance to walking close to God. All he needs is for us to have faith and for us to believe, and that is what will please our Father. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed his story, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.